donuts. We ended up raising a little over $70 for them, so that was really exciting. So thank you guys. Some things with service. So today is the ET Week Expo. So if you signed up to run a booth or do a lab tour, make sure you go and go and fill that. Also, we have the Discover STEM Fair on Saturday. If you signed up for that, make sure you do the Child Protective Training. That's going to be on Saturday. And also, some things with service. We've noticed a lot lately. We've been trying, but one of the complaints we get at the seminar is that there's not enough service opportunities for you guys to fill your points. So what we've been trying to do is we've been trying to have a lot of service opportunities, but a lot of the times, these past activities lately, we've noticed a lot of people cancel right before and go in and delete their names off. And that puts us as officers and the other volunteers in a bind because we're short of people and we're trying to scramble. And it's just not professional, to be honest. So if you sign up, please be there, because if you sign up for something in the real world and you don't show up, you're going to get fired. And we understand that emergencies happen and things come up last minute. And if that's the case, just send us an email so we're aware. But please, if you're going to sign up for something, make sure you're there, because it really does put us in a bind. So we're going to talk about Concrete Canoe, and Jeff is going to talk about that real quick.
Woo! I was not expecting that round of applause. I just want to give a brief announcement. First of all, thank you everyone for helping so far. We are nearing the finish line. Reminder for everyone that is on the team and has been participating and even wants to get involved at this point, tonight at 7, from 7 to 9 in the structures lab, we will be preparing the mold. Because on Saturday is placement day, which is the biggest day at Concrete Canoe, and so we want any and all who want to come and help. We'll be working all day. This is a service opportunity. You can get service points for helping us out on Saturday. There'll be breakfast for the first 30 people. That starts at 8 a.m. 25 people. That starts at 8 a.m. We really need your help. It's going to be an awesome day. We've got it really well planned out, and you'll have a lot of fun, learn a lot about concrete and placement. So please come. We really need your help. There's lots of opportunity for service and activity points. And yes, thank you guys. You're great.
If you guys go to that, make sure you wear dirty clothes so you don't get your nice clothes dirty. Also, with Rocky Mountain Conference, we have the meat and technical paper competition. So the meat paper is a non-technical paper. You guys can see the prompt up there. And there's a technical paper, and that's on any topic in civil engineering. So if there's any juniors or seniors that have a technical paper that they want to enter in, we need those submitted to Dr. Borup in the BYU ASCE email by Tuesday. So that's 5 days, and as an incentive, we're offering a $100 award for whoever's paper is chosen. So make sure you are submit it on the day, and this is to be aware of. If your paper is chosen, you will have to go to Rocky Mountain Conference, which is exciting to do a presentation. It's a lot of fun. It's a great opportunity, so we encourage you all to apply. There's more info about it on the blog if you're interested. Also, with Rocky Mountain Conference, we have 2 additional teams besides Steel Bridge and Concrete Canoe. We have the pre-design team and the surveying team. If you're interested in being part of the pre-design competition, contact Robert Smith. And then also if you want to, we're looking for surveying captains. So if you like surveying, if you like 114 or 113, and you're going to Rocky Mountain Conference, you want to be part of that, sign up, and we're more than happy to have you. And anyone who wants to be on those teams, email us at BYU ASCE email, and we'll get you in contact with who's excited. Also another announcement, the ERI Club meets on Thursday, so tonight at 6. The Soils Lab, and Steel Bridge also wanted me to announce that they are continuing to meet every Tuesday and Wednesday at 7 in the Structures Lab. So today the CUB luncheon is happening. Our speaker, Blaine Leonard, is also going to be presenting there. He's going to be talking about his research and work in autonomous vehicles, so it'll be really exciting. It's at the Carbon Conference Center in rooms 250 to 200, 2,258, and 2256, as you guys can see. I'm sorry. Cafeteria's catering. If you signed up, make sure you pay. And if there's any seniors going, let us know. We need someone to take a picture and write a report on it for us. Also, the Saratoga Springs footbridge that is happening. We have had a lot of people that signed up, and so we're really excited about that. If you signed up, make sure you do the Y training. And we're also looking for people who want leadership point opportunities, so seniors who need that, and also anyone that has welding experience. We have a lot of great people who signed up, but we need some more people with welding experience. So if you're interested, there's details on the blog, or send an email to us, and we'll be more than happy to get you as well. So we have some field trips coming up tomorrow. There's a field trip to the UTA rail yard that Arima is putting on. So that is on the blog if you want to sign up. And we also are trying to schedule a Real Salt Lake facility tour. And they're going to let us play on the soccer, well, rumors have it, they'll let us play on the soccer field. So on the Facebook group, there's a poll for what's best for people. So go in if you want to go to that and vote on what is good for you. Also, so another opportunity we found out about is it's through the construction management school, but in Reno every February they have a huge competition where schools all from the nation gather and do competitions. They have a heavy civil team that competes. So our president Alec Escamilla went this past year and participated in it. And so if you're interested in construction and are interested in like getting out besides like behind the desk and like being out and participating in things, let Alec know and he can give you more information about it. We'll be finding more information about it in the fall as well, and letting you guys know if anyone is interested as well. So it's a really cool opportunity. Looks great on my resume. Just a reminder, there is info on the blog of all the different activities. And to introduce our speaker, so we're really lucky to have Blaine Leonard with us today. He currently works at UDOT, and he's in charge of the technology and innovation section. And so he's working a lot with autonomous vehicles and automated vehicles. And so we're also really lucky to have him because in 2010 he was the president of the entire national, all of ASE. So he was the national president. So we're really lucky to have him today. And he's also a professional engineer in 6 states and is the vice chair on the Utah Professional Engineers and Professional Land Surveyors Licensing Board. And so he's going to talk to us about why our licensure after we graduate is so important. So before we give him a hand and have him come up, we're going to take a picture because he's in our jersey for our Instagram page. So everyone will smile. I'm going to take a picture. Okay. Awesome. Thanks, guys. All right, let's give it up for Blaine Leonard.
Oh, well, it doesn't really fit anyway. Can you hear me in the back? I don't need a microphone, but a remote clicker would be great, if you're okay with that. Fabulous. Good morning. It is morning, right? I almost put a slide in. I was looking at some stuff last night. I almost put a slide in of me paddling the concrete canoe. Back when the concrete canoe competition was just getting started, it was like right after they invented concrete. A long, long time ago. I did a couple of undergraduate years here, and then I got married and my wife lured me to the dark side and I went up to a university in Salt Lake. Sorry. My wife is more important than my education. Guys, pay attention. And our concrete canoe team, our student chapter, actually our whole civil engineering program didn't have enough women to field a women's team in the concrete canoe, so I've got a picture of her, my wife, paddling as well. She was a pharmacy student, not an engineering student. So it was a really big, long, heavy canoe. It was like 700 pounds or something. It took like 6 of us to pick it up. It couldn't have been 700 pounds, just 6 of us to pick it up. But it was big and long and heavy. We had no clue what we were doing. Nobody at the University of Utah had ever done that before. So you want to be a civil engineer. I'm a little curious. We've got a mixture here, right? Seniors, raise your hand. Yoo-hoo, almost done, and then 2 years of graduate school, and then you're finished, right? Juniors. Okay? Carry on. Sophomores. Well, a lot of sophomores. Don't get discouraged. Freshmen. Cool. Go for it. Good place. So you want to be a civil engineer. I'm curious why you want to be a civil engineer. Somebody tell me why you want to be a civil engineer. Oh, come on, there's like 800 of you in here. Good, yeah.
I want to make something that's never been made before.
You want to make something that's never been made. That's cool. Okay? Somebody else.
I want to provide clean water to people.
You want to provide clean water to people. Cool. There's a lot of people on this planet without clean water. Clean water is incredibly important. Somebody else.
I want to change the way we do transportation.
You want to change the way we do transportation. Yeah, you're talking to the right guy. Good. Good, yeah.
I love math and science, and I want to help America build infrastructure.
You want to build infrastructure. That's an important thing. Okay, so, yeah.
Well, I want to build better homes for more people.
Okay, build better homes. Pretty diverse answers, right? So let's talk a little bit about why that's a good thing. Now, this is an old magazine article from Money Magazine in like 2010, so a long time ago, but they looked at the top 50 jobs in the United States, and as you can see, civil and environmental engineering went to the top. We're in the top 10. Why do you think that is?
They're important.
It's important. Partially it is because of what some of you said. It gives us an opportunity to rebuild needed infrastructure. We see tangible results. There aren't many professions where you can spend all day working on something and years later drive by and go, I worked on that. That's a really satisfying feeling. There are varied employment opportunities. I've got a buddy that I went to college with who spent most of part of his career in California, part of it in Utah. He spent most of his career in Cairo, Egypt, and northern England. You can live anywhere. You can live in Moab. You can live in Mumbai, and you can be a civil engineer. Now, you might have to do something a little different than what you want to do. I'm not sure if you want to build tall buildings, you're going to do that in Moab. But there's civil engineering opportunities everywhere. We have the opportunity to protect the environment and public health. Public health is really a key, and most of what you said as to why you want to be a civil engineer has to do with the public good. We're doing something that benefits the public. It can be very challenging. It can also be really boring sometimes. You're working on steel detailing connections for some building that somebody else is doing all the real work on. But we all put up with a little of that to get the challenging work. And there's a lot of growth in civil engineering. There's a lot of opportunity in civil engineering. There will always be a need for civil engineering. So that's part of what we're at. Now, I have had a really abnormally diverse career. So I'm not a model. I'm actually sort of an anomaly. But just to give you an idea about some of the variation in civil engineering, some of you may be familiar with the Thistle landslide up Spanish Fork Canyon. Maybe you're not, because it happened a long time ago in 1983. I spent a lot of time on the Thistle landslide, wrote my master's thesis about the Thistle landslide, ended up as an expert witness on lawsuits about the Thistle landslide. I spent about 10 years of my, 12, 15 years of my life on the Thistle landslide, among other things. I'm a geotechnical engineer by background. I have a master's in geotech. I spent about half of my career in consulting, 20 years in consulting, both geotech and general civil. This is the Lake Park Golf Course in Salt Lake, in West Salt Lake, just west of Bangalore. I designed all the utilities, all the infrastructure, all the grading for the 27-hole golf course, the lakes, the flow control structures, all of that stuff. Spent about 7 years on that project. Frankly, it's one of the reasons I left consulting engineering, but the Huntsman Cancer Center, I've worked on a lot of buildings, small and large, both foundation design, dewatering, and general civil. How do you connect the water and sewer to these buildings? Because those are important. A little mundane, but important. I spent some time working on many of the 2002 Winter Olympic facilities with a consulting firm I was with. We designed the bobsled luge track in our office. We worked on in the office, we worked on every Olympic facility in Utah at the time, and I got to work on a few of them. And I'm currently involved in transportation and traffic management with innovations in that area, and one of the things I've been working on is a connected vehicle project where buses talk to the traffic signals and get extra green time when they're behind schedule to try to get them back on schedule on Redwood Road in Salt Lake City. That project has been running for now about 4 months, and it's kind of been all-consuming for me. So I've had a broad range of things in my career, and you also can focus very specifically in an area or be fairly diverse throughout your career. Now, although I have a master's degree in engineering, geotechnical engineering, I believe my master's education, even though that's not what I'm doing today, prepared me to be able to think outside the box. So I think, put in a pitch, I think graduate school is important. So the civil engineering profession focuses on service. We do things to help the infrastructure, to help the health, safety, and welfare, to improve the quality of life, and to impact the natural environment. We also have an opportunity because of that to be engaged in public policy. Most of us don't become engineers in order to be engaged in public policy. If we wanted to be engaged in public policy, we'd probably be over getting a business degree or a poli-sci degree or something like that. But our voices as engineers need to be heard, and we are perfectly well suited to be there because we know what the infrastructure is, we know how it impacts life, we know how it impacts the economy. We have an opportunity to be involved in all of that and in giving back to the community. You spent the first 10 minutes of this session today talking about service opportunities. Service opportunities exist the rest of your life, partially, not entirely, because of your profession. ASC has a code of ethics. I don't know if you knew that. Most professional societies have a code of ethics. The code of ethics binds us to how we operate as a professional in society. And part of that has to do with safety, health, and welfare of the public and making judgments that are appropriate for that and enhancing the quality of life. We need to always keep in mind, no matter what we're working on, no matter how mundane it might be or exciting it may be, no matter who the client might be, that the public health, safety, and welfare is what we're about. So I was asked largely to talk about licensure today, and this is a lead-in to that concept. Why should we become a licensed engineer? Anybody have an idea? Why should you get an engineering license?
Better pay.
Better paid.
People will take you seriously.
People will take you seriously. Let me address both of those. Better pay is true, and in some organizations like mine, the Utah Department of Transportation, you can't rise above a certain level without that license. So better pay sort of follows. Remind me yours.
People will take you seriously.
People will take you seriously. It's important that people understand that we are professionally trained, professionally prepared, and professionally capable of doing what we're supposed to do. Would you choose to go to a surgeon for an important surgery that wasn't licensed as a surgeon? Well, of course not, right? It's not as clear-cut in engineering, but that's one of the reasons. Why else might we need to get licensed? There's a really important one you missed.
Someone can use the license.
Because it's the law. Okay? If you're an engineer and you're offering your services to the public, you need to be licensed to do that. Now, there's some nuance in there. Let me talk a little bit about the structure. So, inside the state government, there's an organization called DOPL, the Division of Professional Licensing. And it licenses a broad range of professionals in order to protect the public and enhance commerce. So, we license, the organization licenses about 70 different categories of professionals. And it's a really broad range. It's engineers and pharmacists and all kinds of other things. And inside each of those disciplines, there are many subcategories. And in the design trades, architects, landscape architects, engineers, structural engineers, geologists, licensed surveyors are all licensed entities. Here's the website for the DOPL and how you get licensed, and everything I tell you will be on here someplace. We've licensed engineers in the state of Utah since 1955. Every state licenses engineers. The first state to license engineers was, take a guess.
Arizona.
Wyoming. 1905. There was a dispute over water rights. And there were figure out some water rights issues. And the lawyers said, we're in charge of water rights, and the engineers said, no, we're in charge of water rights. And the state weighed in favor of engineers, so we're going to license engineers, they're in charge of water rights. It was a water right dispute that brought this about. We have almost 8,000 licensed engineers in the state of Utah, 2,100 licensed structural engineers in the state of Utah, that's a fairly new licensure category, and about 749 licensed surveyors. DLPL processes 24,000 new applications every year for all professions, not just engineering. 58,000 renewals have to renew, right? So they have an advisory board that helps the state operate the licensure of engineers and surveyors. Here are the members of that board. And what you can see here is there's some civils, there's some structurals, there's some mechanicals, and there's some electricals, because we license the whole range of civil engineering. We are an advisory board. Unlike some states, we don't make decisions. We actually don't review applications of individuals applying for licensure. The staff does that. They bring to us anomalies and weird cases and policy questions. They also bring to us cases where engineers have messed up, and we serve as sort of the judge and jury over people who made mistakes badly. And here are some of the things that we do that I just mentioned as an advisory board. We meet once every other month. The law stipulates, and I'll show you some text here in a minute, that you be licensed if you offer service to the public, and so there's law and there's administrative code that talks about the details of how you get licensed. And if you want to really confuse your mind and pretend like you're a lawyer and don't understand anything at all, read the code. It's a little bizarre. There's another organization you should be aware of. The National Council of Examiners for Engineers and Surveyors, or NCEES we call it, is the national federation of all the state licensing boards. The states license professionals. The federal government does not. The county does not. The state does. And all of the state licensing boards around the country jointly belong to NCEES, and they come together to try to be a little more uniform in how we issue, how we manage, how we maintain licensure across the country. So this is sort of our organization of organizations here. This organization has a model law and model rules that all the states look at and say, well, if we were to change this to be more uniform, what would it look like? This is also the organization that creates the exams that you need to take to get licensed. So they've got volunteer committees of people who write these exams. They've got all kinds of folks who look at the psychometrics of the exams, are the questions fair, are the questions right, all of that stuff. And they're the ones who administer the exams so that all the states don't have to do that. There's a couple of exams, and by the time you take them, they'll be computer-based, not pencil and paper. One of them is now, the other ones are being transitioned. Here's what you have to do to get licensed. First, you need a degree. You need a bachelor's degree in engineering from an accredited university. Okay? Now there are some variations on this. If you have a foreign degree, if you have a degree that's not accredited, if you're licensed in another state, there's some variations on all of this. But basically, you need a bachelor's degree in engineering to get licensed as an engineer. You then take 2 exams. The first exam is the Fundamentals of Engineering exam. That is basically an exam on the principles behind engineering. It's the chemistry and the physics and the math and all of that stuff. You can take that. You have to take that to graduate here? No. You don't. You used to. Okay. Some universities require you. You should take this exam. Okay? You should take this exam. Not a question. Okay? You should take it about the time you get ready to graduate, not after, because you'll forget all this stuff. Right? You need to take the exam. Question?
At what point should you put EIT on after your name on your resume?
So, I'll talk about that in a second, but EIT is not a designated license in the state of Utah. It really shouldn't be used. Because it's not defined, it doesn't mean anything. There's a lot of argument, discussion about what a person who's passed that exam but hasn't taken the PE exam yet should call themselves. Everybody does it a little bit differently. EIT is technically not the proper term.
When you take the FE in one state and then go to another state, let's say to do graduate school or to start your career, does the EIT, is it valid through
The
each state?
Fundamentals of Engineering examination is valid anywhere. It's a national exam. In fact, if you live here, maybe you're going to work here, but at Christmas time you're going to go visit Grandma in Tallahassee. You can take it there while you're there on Christmas break and then come back here. You can take it wherever. In fact, when you sign up for the Fundamentals of Engineering exam through the NCEES website, it's where you sign up for that, you can tell it where you want to take it because it's just given a testing center. You can pick any place you want. And you can change, for a small fee, you can change that after you've registered where you want to take it. So you can take it wherever you want. After you do this, the second exam you need to take is the professional engineer exam. Now, in some states, and I'll talk about experience here in a second, in some states, like Utah, you can take that anytime after you've passed the Fundamentals of Engineering exam. So you can graduate in April, take the Fundamentals of Engineering exam in May, take the Professional Engineer's exam in July, if you want. I wouldn't recommend it. The Professional Engineering exam is focused on design level problems. A lot of the kinds of things you do in senior coursework, but a lot of the kinds of things you do in practice. Statistics demonstrate that the people who do best on that exam take it about 3 years out of school, 3 to 4 years out of school. Now in some states, you have to have your required years of experience before you can sit for the exam. That was the case when I took it. In Utah, you can now take it whenever you want. And in some states, that's true. If you were to take it here, a year out of school, and eventually get licensed here, some other states may give you a little grief about when you took it. So just kind of keep that in mind and kind of look around. You take these exams directly by applying to NCEES. EIT and SIT are not recognized titles in Utah. Now you also need some years of experience. We as a licensing board, we as a state, me as the public in Utah wants to make sure that you've had some experience doing what you know what to do, rather than just some academic background before you actually are licensed to do it on your own. And so the idea here is, in Utah, you need 4 years of progressive experience. Progressive experience means not doing the same year over and over and over, but progressively getting harder, more challenging assignments at work. That needs to be done after you graduate. So summer internships don't count. Working while you're going to school doesn't count in the undergraduate setting. If you're a professor, 3 years of teaching will count towards that, but not the full 4. Of course, if you have a PhD, you only need 2 years of, you get 2 years of credit for that anyway. So, and it needs to be verified by a qualified supervisor. Generally, you need to be working under the auspice of a licensed professional engineer who then vouches for the work that you did. There's a form they fill out to vouch for that. Now, there are, again, always anomalies, and we work around some of those, but that's the general deal.
What if you work while you're doing your master's degree? Is that
So-
just the 1 year for the master's now?
Work during master's degree counts. I think what the staff does is says, you want a year of credit for the master's degree or a year of credit for the full-time work, you can't have both. So you kind of choose one or the other. I think that's how they deal with that. I tried to do both, and they turned me down. This was, in 1910, but I actually haven't finished my master's degree and wanted credit for the master's degree even though I wasn't done, partial credit, and they said, well, you're not doing that. By the time I argued with them, I had my years of experience already, so it was kind of ludicrous. Now, again, keep in mind, every state is different. In California, it's 2 years of experience. You get licensed after 2 years. So I had buddies who came out of school, this is back when you had to wait 4 years to take the exam. I had buddies who went to California after 2 years of working in Utah, took the California PE exam, got licensed in California, came back here, got their last 2 years, and then got Utah licensure, not by exam, but by comity or reciprocity. A license over there, recognize that, and give you a license here. And there's a process of doing that. And that's what we call the comity path. So, if you plan to get licensed in multiple states, because you're going to work around, you're a big consulting firm, you're going to move around or whatever, The way to do this is when you're getting your first licensure, go to NCWS and establish an NCWS record. What that allows you to do is take all of your documenting paperwork that you need to submit to a state and put it in one central place. So after you're licensed in Utah and Nevada and you decide you want to get licensed in Connecticut, you go to NCWS, you have the NCWS record sent to Connecticut, and it says, here's their experience log, here's their verifying supervisors, here's their academic records, here's their test results, and then Connecticut can very quickly look at it and say, okay, that works. So it eases the process of licensing in other states. Now, again, there are a couple of states where that doesn't entirely work. California, for instance, for a civil engineer, requires 2 additional exams. A half-day exam on surveying and a half-day exam on seismic principle to be a civil engineer. You have to take those in addition to what you took anyplace else. So, and there are a few other states with requirements like that. And that's really because of their seismic risk in California. So that's sort of the essence of that. Now, here's another little twist. In Utah, we license you. If you look at my PE stamp, it says licensed professional engineer. It doesn't say licensed civil engineer. It doesn't say licensed geotechnical engineer. It says licensed professional engineer. That's not true in every state, but most states license you as an engineer. Now, the PE exam you take may be specifically civil. In fact, I think the civil exam has subsets. You can choose to focus on the water resources side or the traffic engineering side, but when you're done, you've taken a civil exam, you get, and our records show that you took the civil exam, but you're licensed as a professional engineer. Legally, as a licensed professional engineer with a geotechnical engineering background, I can practice electrical engineering in the state of Utah, if I'm competent to do so. So if by the nature of my practice and learning over many years of working, I've learned how to do certain things, I can practice that as an engineer. Now, if I'm called into court and somebody examines my record, they could argue that I'm not competent to practice in that area and have me disciplined for that. So you have to be careful. It's a sort of a self-certifying sort of a thing. In some states, that's not true. In California, I'm a licensed civil engineer. I can only practice civil engineering. And as a civil engineer in California, I can practice geotechnical engineering, but I can't call myself a geotechnical engineer because I don't have a California geotechnical engineering license. In California, after you get your civil license, you then can get specialties in things like geotechnical. No one would hire me to do geotechnical because I'm not titled as a geotechnical engineer there, but legally I can do that work. As a civil engineer, I can design small structures in California, but not tall structures, not tall buildings, not hospitals and not schools, without being a structural engineer, which requires more exams. Utah also has a structural engineering license, and I think I've got a slide on that in a minute, I think. Yeah?
So with every state you get licensed in, do you get a stamp for each state?
Yes. Yep. So you get a stamp for every state you're in. Some states allow electronic signatures and electronic stamps now, so you don't need the old rubber stamp. I have a rubber stamp for most of those states. For Utah, I actually have a little crimper stamp as well. It puts an imprint in the paper. I don't know if they make those anymore. This was before automobiles when that was happening. So, yes, because every license is different. Every license number is different because it's state-based. There is a fee for application as well. That's sort of a given, right? There's an application fee. You have to certify that you're of decent moral character, as do your witnesses. You have to indicate if you have any criminal background, etc., etc. For in Utah to be a licensed professional structural engineer, you have to first be a licensed engineer. As a licensed engineer, you practice in structural engineering under a structural engineer for 3 more years, and you have to have experience in certain kinds of structural design tasks. And then you take a 2-part exam, which I think is 2 days, to get a structural engineer license. Once you're a Utah structural engineer, you are no longer a Utah professional engineer. You sort of give up one to get the other. We have a case we dealt with last year where a gentleman who was practicing structural engineering in the state of Utah made some serious mistakes, and the state and the board took away his structural engineering license and gave him back his professional engineering license, saying you can do these things but not those things. And then he just never really quite caught on. We eventually took away his professional engineering license. Case after case after case of him not quite getting it. Anybody here interested in getting a license as a surveyor? We license surveyors in the state of Utah. It now requires that you have a degree, a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree or more than that, with certain kinds of qualifications, certain kinds of experience. There aren't very many surveying academic programs in the country. In fact, I think the only one in Utah might be at UVU. I'm not sure of that. But it doesn't say here, but I'm reasonably certain you could qualify with an engineering degree if you took the right kinds of courses. They also have a couple of exams, similar kinds of exams, and a Utah-specific exam that talks about state rules, and a bunch of years of experience depending on what your level of education is, and an application. Now, there is what we call an industrial exemption. You might know an engineer who's not licensed, who's practicing engineering. There are actually a lot of them. There are actually a lot more of them than there are of us, interestingly, because this state and most states has what we call an industrial exemption. If you're an employee of a communications company, a utility company, a railroad, a mining company, a petroleum company, or a manufacturing company, and everything you do is solely for that company, and you're not offering services directly to the public, legally you don't need to be licensed. If you're working for Questar Gas, if you're working for Thiokol Industries, if you're working for General Motors, Boeing, you don't need to be licensed in the state. I have a son who's an electrical engineer. He works in industry. I've tried to get him to get licensed. He hasn't done it. Part of the problem is he's never worked for anybody who's been licensed, so he has a hard time getting the experience qualifications. Most electrical, mechanical, chemical engineers are not licensed because most of them do not offer services to the public. So there's a difference here in professional liability versus tort liability. I'm not a lawyer, but if you're offering services to the public and you mess up, you are professionally liable and you can be sued for those errors. Now, if you're working for a consulting firm or the state, someone will indemnify you probably, but you're personally sued or your organization is personally sued based on those. If you're working for General Motors, you're building a product. And if there's a mistake in the product liability law applies to that product. So the company gets sued because they designed a bad product. The engineer doesn't get sued for that product. So there's a very distinct difference. Now, I revisit the question of why we should be licensed. You might say, well, look, I'm not going to go and work for a civil engineering consulting firm. I'm going to go to work for Questar Gas. Therefore, I don't need to be licensed. Most people today don't work for the same company for their entire career. Most people move around, sometimes by choice and sometimes not. I've known people who spent 30 years at Boeing, gotten laid off, talented structural engineers who now are not licensed and have a hard time finding a job because a structural engineering firm won't hire them without a license. And at 55 years old, going back and taking those exams is a daunting task. I would recommend as a civil engineer, you get licensed, okay? Unless you are leaving civil engineering and you're going to go work for PricewaterhouseCoopers as a consultant for the rest of your life and never intend to do any engineering work, I would recommend you get licensed because it gives you mobility over your career. It gives you the ability to move around. It gives you a credential that sets you apart and that makes a difference. And something that's sort of a badge you can wear. Yeah?
Well, how often do you need to renew your license?
So that depends on the state. The renewal of the license, let me see if I've got a... The renewal of the license requires two things: continuing education, and it's generally about 15 continuing ed hours a year. I've got 32 years up here. That's true for Utah. That's true generally in most states, give or take a little bit. And certifying that you have done that. Sometimes you get audited, you have to show that. Certifying that you're still not a criminal and you're not in jail, and paying a fee. So in Utah, it's every 2 years. Some states it's every 3, some it's every 4, some it's every year. It just depends on the state, which causes some people a little bit of administrative grief. I've got a buddy who's a structural engineer in Salt Lake. I think he's licensed in like 40 states. Because he does work all over the country. He does metal buildings. I don't know how he keeps track of all that. I'm sure his secretary has some giant spreadsheet. And NCAAS, I think, has a tool where you can log your stuff in and track it and keep track of all of that. But continuing education is not terribly difficult to get. If you're practicing professionally, you ought to be staying educated on what's going on. You ought to be going to seminars or workshops. Sometimes you can do that locally. Sometimes you have to fly someplace to do that. Sometimes you can do that online. Utah law allows you to do a little bit of that as self-study. So it just depends. So it's not terribly rigorous in most states. If you're licensed in New York State, I think you have to get most of your continuing ed in New York. So if you're licensed in New York and you live in California, I don't know exactly how you do that. There was a hand over here.
Could it be beneficial to get the license even though we may be planning on going into business and not even doing it?
So if you are absolutely certain you're going to go into business and you never plan to practice engineering, I can see why you might not get that license. I know a couple of lawyers in Salt Lake who are engineers. They maintain their license because as they work on cases that are related to design and construction, it gives them better insight and better credibility. So they do that. If you're going to go into business and work, manufacturing light bulbs, maybe not. It's something you have to think about. I believe most of us don't know where we're going to be in 15 years. I spent 20 years in the consulting industry. I never planned to work for the government. I've been there 17 years. Okay? You just don't know. So I'd err on the side of caution. You've done all this work. Now, the trick, of course, is if you never work in engineering, you never get the experience, so it's hard to get the license, right? So if you leave here with a degree, you pass the FE exam, you go work for PricewaterhouseCoopers, you're analyzing business plans for Google for the next 5 years, you're not going to get the experience to get a license, so that may drive some of that. So you want to think about that. If I never plan to go back, okay. But if someday I want to be engaged somehow in engineering, maybe I've got to figure out a way to get that experience. Interesting question. I mentioned that we have that the state has a role, the board has a role in this, of making sure that you practice competently and fairly and professionally, and you can be fined or have your license denied or revoked or suspended for a whole variety of unprofessional and unlawful conduct. This is just a few of them, including practicing outside your area of expertise. So just always need to be cautious what you're doing and how you're doing it. Kind of keep track of what the law says you ought to do in the state you're practicing in. So I think I've covered sort of the gamut of licensure, some ethics, why we want to do this. More questions? Yeah?
So we're going to grad school, and a lot of people have PE. Is it better just to take the PE right after we're done grad school, right before, so we know or is there a lot of different things on that?
I still think, and people argue with this, I still think that you're best off taking the PE exam after you've had some work experience. So if you do grad school, that helps, that's good. I think I'd get out and do a year before the work. Now, you might be one of those kind of guys who says, look, I take the exam 3 times, I'm okay with that. Take it once, if I pass it, I'm done. You can take that approach. People pass it right out of school. The peak is 3 to 4 years. And then it declines after that. And it declines, frankly, it declines the more time you take it. People who fail at once have a harder time passing it the second time. Not that you should give up. I have a coworker who took it 7 times. I felt bad for the guy. Really bright guy, speaks like 5 languages. Had a mental block about taking exams. Had a mental block about, well, and of course after he failed it 3 times, he really had a mental block. Had a mental block about answering questions. I mean, he wanted to compartmentalize everything. A lot of times your undergraduate engineering coursework and the homework you do is fairly compartmentalized, right? Given this and given this and given this, solve for this. In real life, there are no givens. And in the PE exam, the givens are a little sketchier. Given these 8 things, 4 of which you don't need to know, but you know which ones. You know, what's the scenario involved here? Real life is about that. Here's a scenario. What are you going to do in this scenario? Well, what are the givens? I don't know. You got to go figure out what the givens are. I got a whole presentation I can talk about that, but there was another question. Yeah.
What is like the usual PE exam pass rate?
Oh man, the usual PE exam pass rate. My recollection is it's somewhere on the order of about 65% for first-time takers who've had 3 or 4 years of experience. It's a little higher than that for BYU students. But I think it's in that ballpark, 65, 70%. It's been a while since I've seen those numbers. Other questions? Okay, thanks for your attention. Appreciate it.
Because it's like